Here's a bonus. What about other subjects that's not math, right? Most games do have a math component, right? For games, you have to add up points. You have to sort of figure out the probability of desired outcome. You have to track resources, right? Oh, how many sheep do I have? How many trees and bricks and things do I have? And how many do I need before I can get that other thing that I want in the game? But so it's fairly easy to take a game and go, yep, there's math in this game. I say we're doing math. But what about history, for example? I talk about history specifically because I've done this. Many games take place in some kind of historical context, take place in a lot of war games specifically, right? Because history's got a lot of wars in it. But how would you use games in history? Is it just reward for work done in class? Hey, you guys are finished, here, play a game, right? It's history related, right? It's kind of related to our topic. Do you use it to introduce a topic? Do you do, well, here's our new topic, play this game, see what you figure out about this setting, and then we'll learn more about it. Do you use it to reinforce learning, where you've already talked about the topic, and you said, okay, we've talked about a specific topic, now let's play a game that's set in this time period we just talked about to see if you recognize any of the connections. And can you use it for assessment? Can you actually get marks or grades or some kind of observing of learning through playing the game? Well, here's what I did. I was teaching grade 7 Canadian history. So I used these 2 games by Academy Games, not at the same time. One I used before French-Indian War, of course, it's an extension of the 7 Years' War. And then the next unit was 1812. But they're both by Academy Games. They're both for very similar mechanics, only minor changes between the 2 games. So once I taught the one, it was easier to teach the other. And they're very risk-like. They are strategy war games. And a lot of students, when I showed it to them, said, is this risk? Because that's the only one type of game like this they'd ever actually heard of. So I gave them an assignment based on this. I gave them the assignment, the entire assignment, before we played the game. I also looked at the topic, right? So we watched a couple of videos. We read some stuff in the textbook. I talked about it, whichever one it was that we were doing at the time. I posted the PDF of the rules on the class website, and we had a day in class where I showed them how to play. Okay? And those students who wanted to practice a bit to get a sense of how the game plays, they were totally welcome to come in at lunchtime and play as well. And I would help them out a bit more learning the rules. And this is all before actually playing the game and giving the assignment or making it due. I wanted them to know what was on the assignment beforehand so they knew what to look for while they were playing. So some of the questions that I gave them are here. These games run on event cards. So use a card to either move some troops around or an event card that does some effect in the game. And the event cards were based on real people and real events that happened during that particular time period, whether it was the 1754, the French-Indian War, or if it was the War of 1812. So one of the questions was to explain an event card they used in the game and what was on the card. What event or person does it depict, and what effect does it have in the game, and how is that related to what actually happened in real life? So, for example, in 1812, the First Nations, by the First Nations faction, they have a Tecumseh card. And the Tecumseh card, when you play that at the beginning of a battle, forces the American militia to roll their dice before the battle starts, and any results of flee that come up get applied before the battle, because the Americans were terrified of the First Nations and Tecumseh and his warriors because of their ferocity in battle, which partly might have been exaggerated by British propaganda, who would have used that, to shock the Americans, right? They would have talked that up a little bit. But the overall effect was that they were terrified by them. So playing that card allows you to get some of the potentially American troops to run away before the battle starts. The Isaac Brock card, for example, allows you to any militia units in the battle that he's involved, or that card is involved in, get an extra attack, because famously and possibly apocryphally, his last words at the Battle of Queenston Heights were "on York militia," right? We don't know for sure if that was true, if that's just a legend, but apparently that inspired the militiamen in that battle to greater bravery and valor, and then help push the Americans back off the Queenston Heights. Another thing I asked them is, what happened in your game that happened in history? What happened in your game that was different? And this could be anything like a battle where it took place. And there was a lot of Googling happening during games while we were playing this. I'd have students have a battle in a certain named area on the map. The next thing they're looking up, was there a battle there? And who won? So I'm getting answers like, oh, we had a battle here between the French and the British. And in real life, the French won that battle. Then our battle, the British won that battle, or like in our game. So they were actually looking at like independent research to find that out. And then I had them create a new event card to explain how its game effect relates to what is depicted on it. So we had to know something else, either someone else who's not mentioned in the game, but was part of the actual event, or some other event that happened, which might have an effect. For 1812, I did several students gave me Captain James Fitzgibbon cards for that one, because we were also reading Bully Boys by Eric Walters at the time. And that takes place during the War of 1812. And the main character is James Fitzgibbon, who was a real person. Doesn't get mentioned as often as Isaac Brock, who is, although he's only around for the first part of the war before he's killed at Queenston Heights, is commonly upheld as a hero of the time. So that was really interesting. So there's a lot of independent research being done by the students looking into who was around at the time, what other things happened, that I can make a card and do a thing in the game to go along with that card. So there's a lot of engagement in not just the game, but also the history that the game was describing. So some of the outcomes from this, from doing the history, some students who never played strategy games before, they got to play, and they came in and played at lunch quite frequently. I had one group of students who 20 minutes to eat, 40 minutes to lunch recess, they would finish eating a little bit early, right? Maybe only take 12, 15 minutes to eat, but they could get the game out, set it up, play the game, put it all away just as the bell was finishing to end lunch. But I think it's an opportunity for them to play where they might not have a game like this at home, or another opportunity to play it. And of course, students readily engaged in independent research. There's an interesting, another interesting story where I was watching a game over the shoulders of the students as they were playing, and we'd done a bit of research. We'd watched a couple of videos, read some from the book, had some discussions. And in 1754, one of the things you can do is play the George Washington card if you have it. If you're playing the British, you have the George Washington card, because at the time, George Washington was a British general. And he allows you to build a fort somewhere on the map, and the fort gives you defensive bonuses for that region, for that territory. But there's places on the map that are already marked, so you can only place the fort on one of those marked areas, and because that's where historically forts were. So he plays the George Washington card, he looks at the map, looks around and says, okay, where's a good place where I need a fort? Oh, here's a place I need a fort, because here's where I'm being threatened by the French. So he grabs the little fort token, he puts it on there, and reads on the board that was Fort Necessity. He goes, oh, I just built Fort Necessity with the George Washington card, just like George Washington did in real life. And then he paused, and I said, that's pretty cool. So what are you going to do now? Then he paused and said, I'm going to write that down, so that he could include that in his report after about things that happened in real life. So I thought that was interesting to see that he'd learned this information, and actually it became reinforced when it happened in the game. He actually compared what happened, what he'd already learned, to information that he had now. And that's what that learning is, right? It's that connection. So there you go. Here's a couple of pictures, somewhat censored for the privacy of the students whose faces you can see. But we've got them playing 1754 on the left and in the center, and on the right there's like 3 games going on at the same time. The one at the very front is A Few Acres of Snow, also set during the 7 Years' War. So it plays a little bit differently than the other ones, but same thing, same locations and places that were important are on that map, and they gave them a sense of where everything was. All right, so there you go. That end for real this time. Thanks for listening. Keep learning and having fun all at the same time. If you have any questions, send me an email. That'd be great. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback.